Hi, everybody, and welcome back. We're very excited that you are joining us tonight for our seventh in our webinar series. And we're very excited that tonight we have with us Dr. Gujral. She is an integrative medicine expert, and she is going to join me this evening in a conversation about what I playfully entitling this labeled it the other medicine. So integrative medicine and sort of what it has to offer us. So we'll start briefly by a housekeeping item, which is that for those of you who are outside of the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area this evening, you may or may not know that we are in the midst of a little bit of snow, sleeting rain, and generalized weather drama that could potentially result in either our backline IT team having an issue or myself or Dr. Gujral. So hopefully nobody will have any IT issues tonight, but we will just start off with that brief apology that if we do have IT issues and we go down, we're sorry in advance. So without further ado, and much more importantly than our little bit of housekeeping there due to the weather, Dr. Gujral, do you want to introduce yourself and give us a little bit of a sense of who you are and a little bit of background
Certainly.
to get us started?
Certainly. Thank you, Dr. Weathington. So I wanted to just put it out there. So I have my doctorate in nursing practice. I'm not an MD. My name is Harpreet Gujral, and I've been in healthcare for over 30 years and very interested in integrative approaches, which I will go into further detail what that means. But being born in India, my mom would just bring us, to the Unani doctor, Ayurvedic doctor, or homeopathy physician, and so she would triage depending on what was going on with any of 5 of us siblings. So growing up in India, this was something that was near and dear to me, and I saw it. Having worked in integrative medicine at Johns Hopkins, and very proud co-founder of the department, I learned a great bit about integrative medicine there. As a nurse practitioner, I am very interested in well-being and really looking at and empowering people to see how 85% of our health comes from our lifestyle. So really maybe having a conversation today about what can we do at home every day to improve our health.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So one of the things we've asked, actually, in my preview questions, I didn't warn you about this one, so you can duck it if you want. But one of my favorite questions is to ask our participants sort of a fun fact about them, something interesting about you. For instance, people have talked about hobbies that they have, sports teams that they've played on, famous people that they've run into on the streets. One person plays English handbells, for instance. So just sort of interesting things to provide a non-work, non-professional context to a little bit about you. So if you feel comfortable, a fun fact about you.
Certainly. So I have, I offered to help in the kitchen, one of the mindfulness center kitchen. And I thought, oh, I'm just going to help out and chop onions or something. And they said, oh no, go ahead. You can cook this tofu dish. And here are the 4 ingredients and go ahead and cook it. So I made food for 150 people, meditators, who were there for a 3-day retreat. I've never made food for 150 people before. So it was kind of nerve-wracking and exciting at the same time. It came out pretty good.
Yes, it's a made for TV TV show, in all the cooking shows. So that's wonderful. Why don't we start with just something very basic? What is integrative medicine?
Yes, so it's actually, just how the name suggests, and it can be very confusing at times, but what the name suggests is it's integrating all approaches. So it does not mean that we put away this wonderful Western medicine that I utilize, I have been trained in, and I utilize for my own family or myself. It's actually incorporating Western medicine and Eastern medicine all come together. So integrating all approaches that are evidence-based, science-backed. And so it's really important for us to not think that some of the unproven, unresearched things that can also come under this umbrella. So it's really important for us to say, this is not the snake oil, it's really evidence-based practice, studies that, so there's a lot of evidence around that. And it's using various modalities, for example, exercise like Qigong, Tai Chi, yoga, and it could be meditation, it could be aromatherapy, acupuncture, all of those coming together and seeing what best fits the person who we are, and seeing them as a whole person.
Yeah. So terminology gets sort of thrown around. Is integrative medicine, would you consider it different from complementary medicine? Are they two sides of this? Are they similar? Sort of what the jargon seems to change or stay the same but mean different things. So could you clarify a little bit that jargon for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in DC, where we live in DC area, and NIH had a lovely center called, it was the NCAM, so National Institute of Complementary and Alternative Medicine. And just a couple of years ago, they changed their name to NCCIH, National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. And so complementary is just something that complements to the current therapy, but integrative approach is looking at all of the approaches. So it's more comprehensive. I would say if you were looking at a bigger umbrella or a bigger circle, then, complementary is one of the circle, that is encompassed by the bigger integrative medicine approach or integrative health approach.
Yeah. So if we were to talk about integrative medicine specialists, what sort of, is there a particular training? Is there a particular boarding? Sort of what allows a person to give themselves that label? Or what?
Yes, certainly. So we are living in a very exciting times, I would say. When I've been in nursing, in healthcare for 32 years, and for the longest time, this was something not, it was looked very down upon, even though the data shows us that, people spend billions of dollars out of pocket on complementary and integrative approaches. And yet, and healthcare, you and I know this, in a lot of times in history, we would shy away from asking, like, what herbs are you taking or what supplements are you on? Because then it opens up a can of worms. And so I would say we're, in the current times, there's a great residency program for physicians and advanced practice practitioners at University of Arizona. So Andrew Wilde, it's called AWCIM, AWCIM, Andrew Wilde Center for Integrative Medicine. And so people can actually attend the fellowship and then take the board exam to be an integrative medicine provider. For myself, I went to University of Minnesota, and they have a doctorate in nursing practice with focus on integrative health and healing. And so with the DNP, it was more, how do we change the systems? How do we change the hospital approach in how care is provided? So I was very interested in looking at, not just me meeting with a patient and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do, but looking at of changing the culture of the organization, culture of the practice, culture of the department, and see how we can incorporate integrative medicine approach as a system in place.
Yeah. So then if a patient, if a patient wants to find a GYN oncologist, for instance, we'll often say to them, go to sgo.org, and there's a segment there that says, find a physician or find a gynecologic oncologist, and you can click on it and you can look it up, and it will give you, information about where someone local to you is. Is there something similar for integrative medicine, or is there a strategy you would recommend for finding a local provider?
Yes. So you definitely want someone who has been trained, I would say someone who is knowledgeable of Western medicine as well, because I think that gives them the credibility, and then they can be the bridge between, the person's healthcare provider and the integrative approaches. So there are lots of very credible providers who are MDs, DOs, and they have been trained, or nurse practitioners or PAs have been trained in Western medicine, but also have had the residency or training in integrative medicine approach. Within the DC metropolitan area, there are some very credible, if you were to look into integrative medicine approaches, there are very credible practices out there who, do practice in that way. And at Hopkins, we have our wonderful, my colleague, Dr. Rosie Scheinberg, who is trained and board certified in anesthesiologist and in anesthesiology, but also in integrative medicine. Right now she's very busy during the pandemic season. She's been really called upon on her anesthesiology expertise. So she is seeing patients, but not as often as she would like to. If someone was to look up at Johns Hopkins website for integrative medicine, they can actually also find her address. Sibley Hospital also on their website have had some information about that.
So if you were to, let's say, call up and make an appointment with her, we're all used to going to see a doctor like myself. You come in to see me, there's a history form, almost no matter what specialty you're going to see, the core elements are the same. And even many of the symptom questions are the same. And then there's generally a segment that's very specific to the issue that you may be having. But so patients are familiar with that process. If you went to an integrative medicine specialist, what would be the frame of the appointment, or what would sort of be the typical process types of questions that would be asked? Sort of walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, certainly. So, we're very interested in, how we are interested in their birth history, so to speak. So, where were they born, what is their, ordinal state, like are they the eldest, the youngest, their, how has their health been over the years. We want to know if there was any significant health issue, at certain time. So it's almost the same history, same health, but we're looking at a global picture. And then we dive down, we're very interested in knowing about their diet history, stress level, because mind and body connection, as we know, neuroimmunology, it's a real thing. We want to see, if how much stress. We are interested in their ACE, scores, the adverse childhood experience. That's really important in inflammation, as we know. So it's very detailed in that way. Usually the appointment is for an hour or maybe longer. So 60 to 90 minutes appointment, and really a report that gets formed, because we're really diving into, getting to understand the person as a human being. And it's more also using principles of coaching, motivational interviewing, and really understanding the issue at hand, and empowering them to make some changes in their lifestyle using all of the approaches that are available. This could be, them going to see an acupuncturist for, let's say they're having some symptoms right now on peripheral neuropathy, maybe there's nausea, or maybe, leftover neuropathy, like I said, or, just general well-being, and seeing an acupuncturist twice a week can actually really add to their vitality, and help with some of the symptoms management. If they are looking at some sort of movement, then sending them to a yoga therapist, or seeing a Tai Chi master or Qigong practice. So it really evolves into who is this person who's sitting in front of us and what resonates best with them. So it's almost like I use a metaphor of providing people a buffet, and then they are able to fine tune and really prepare their meal the way that best resonates with them. So we provide lots of options, and we collectively then decide based on the science and what is at hand that we're dealing with, and come up with a plan.
So if we dive into some of those interventions, you've mentioned a few sort of scattered throughout your responses, but one that's come up a few times is acupuncture. And I think all of us get a lot of questions about acupuncture. Where is acupuncture helpful, and with what symptoms is acupuncture most helpful for? So where in sort of an integrative medicine approach, where are the areas or the categories of things for which acupuncture is really something that's commonly brought up or discussed?
Yeah. So I would say acupuncture can be utilized. I'm biased. I actually used to get the, acupuncture done, and it was just wonderful. I used it once or twice for just well-being, but
Yep.
other times it was more like there was inflammation in my elbow or something in the, back. And so it was an intervention to actually help with pain and swelling. So it could be for general vitality, improve vitality. We would have people who are looking at into getting pregnant, improving fertility, for pain management, for nausea. So all sorts of things. It was a mixed bag. And, I think what's important is to make sure that you're going to, and so there is a society for acupuncturists. And so going in there and looking at the good, you can enter your zip code and look for someone who's trained well and who's certified and board certified with one of the um, um, colleges.
Yep.
So it'll be very important. Yeah, one of the societies, and getting someone who specializes, because people actually find their niches. So we have some who are in women's health, and others are more interested in sports injuries and so forth. So it's good to look at the website and see what this person is interested in. I would say for, not everyone is trained in oncology acupuncture. And some of the acupuncturists go out of their way. They actually are very interested in treating. They have received training from MD Anderson. There is an online program or in person. So they have gone out to get extra training. And so if someone was seeking specific oncology related management, I would say, please ask the question, like, how many patients do you see with oncology diagnosis? How do you manage? How were you trained? So asking those questions are really important to make sure you have a good match with the acupuncturist.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Does it hurt, acupuncture? I'm going to
So
reveal I've clearly never had it, but it's a question. So I sometimes recommend it to patients, same things you mentioned. So neuropathy, pain, fatigue, which I think maybe when you mention overall wellness and vitality, I think as the doctor, I would label that perhaps we're talking about a similar thing there in some respects. So patients will say to me, but doesn't it hurt? I don't like needles poking into me. That seems, I don't know.
yeah.
So yeah, what's your experience?
Yeah.
You can come
So
both
I have to
professionally and personally, it seems. Yeah.
Yes. So I have to say, I personally am very afraid of needles. And so even though I'm in healthcare and I have given thousands of injections myself, I actually don't even look like when someone is giving me a shot. I get my flu shot and I'm like looking away. But these needles are very, very, they're hair thin. They're just very tiny needles. And the right person, who gives it, so there might be a little discomfort. It gets better as we get used to it, so we know what to expect. And there are different skills, different techniques to do it. So sometimes it's a hair thin needle that just goes in, and they have to just slightly rotate to stimulate the area to cause a general inflammation for it to actually start, to work.
Mm-hmm.
So every acupuncturist will have a little bit slightly different technique, but I have not experienced people saying like they walked away, feeling so much in pain secondary to needles. They usually feel so much better, or start to feel when initially the chi is moving. They call the chi the energy. They might say, well, I was really sore, but now I can feel like there's something moving within, So it's really different experience for different people. But we used to have lots of people come in for acupuncture, and, no one stayed home saying, oh, I'm afraid of needles, I don't want to come in. They just got so much out of the treatments that they felt good. Now, I have to warn, I have to say, you may not notice the difference with one treatment. Usually the recommendations are at least to get 8 to 10 sessions. So it's usually 2 to 3 times a week. So I would say at least twice a week for several weeks before you can start to appreciate the difference. So we should never give up and say, oh my God, I had 4 sessions and I didn't notice a lot, so I'm not going to go. That's where we can go wrong. So it's really important to make sure that we're giving it enough try. And what's uh, great right now is insurance companies, some of them are actually covering acupuncture as a modality. So it's really important to call your insurance company and find out if that's a covered benefit, which is a great adjunct therapy to have.
And then you mentioned typically 8 to 10 treatments before coming to conclusions. Are there often, for things like neuropathy or chronic pain, which are long-term, is there a maintenance process, or is it really
Yes.
an 8 to 10 intervention and then you move on to your next thing, so to speak?
Mm-hmm. So thank you for asking. So I would say minimum is 8 to 10 just to appreciate something moving, something happening. But generally, the treatment plan is for at least 20 visits. So usually insurance would cover 20 or 24 visits in a year, because they know that when someone is getting acupuncture, it's usually for 3 months or so. They're coming in and seeing the acupuncturist on a regular basis, usually twice or 3 times a week. So within 6 weeks to 8 weeks, they've actually had several treatments. And once that acute process is complete or is better, there is maintenance. People can just come in once a week, for their maintenance. We have people who used to come like they were coming for months to years because they just wanted, it's like it's like getting a massage, or so to speak. You just feel well and you feel vital and you feel like everything is moving. So a cheap intervention in addition to acupuncture is acupressure, and that we can apply ourselves. So as we know in traditional Chinese medicine, which is not my training, it's just something that I'm interested in, and just speaking with my colleagues. I am a practitioner of Qigong, which is QI. Last word is GONG, Gong. So cultivating energy, Qi, and creating Qi. Basically, the framework is that our body has lines of or rivers of energy, and when there is blockages, that's when we start to feel a disease or inflammation starts to develop. So that's more for traditional Chinese medicine. In Western medicine, we can see how the inflammation starts to build. So when people are using acupressure points, for example, this is large intestine 4. It's between the thumb and the index finger. There's a web. And it's, if you press it like towards where the web ends in the middle, it's quite tender at times. And so that's a acupressure point called large intestine 4, LI4. It's not affecting our large intestine. It's just the point. And it's actually great for well-being. It's great for building chi, for energy, helpful for pains and aches, migraine headaches, and so forth. So we can use acupressure points in addition to acupuncture for daily well-being. It's almost like brushing teeth twice a day, but then we go and see a dental hygienist to get our teeth cleaned, and so forth. So likewise, there's a daily regimen. If we can follow that for our own health, it's a good way to keep up.
I have to admit, my hands are down. You can't see it, but I'm sitting here pressing and trying to find my tender spot as we speak. Now, you mentioned massage actually just now.
Yes.
Is that considered within the realm of what would be considered an integrative medicine approach?
Yes. So massage therapy is a wonderful, if I may
Yeah.
I just show one more point? So this is called, here's a wrist crease, and just 3 finger breadths below the wrist crease, between the 2 tendons is a point. So the top and back, so it's like this. You press it in the front and the back. It's called a P1-6. So it's a P6 point, and that's anti-nausea point, which is great for nausea relief. and people can press it for 45 to 50 seconds, and then they can, so you breathe deep and you hold it, and then you can try it again on this side, on the other hand. And it's a great way to manage nausea. In addition to anti-nausea medication, if someone was, suffering from nausea, it's a good point to do so. So massage, Dr. Weddington, there's actually a special society for oncology massage therapists. So, and they've done a lot of work in understanding how lymphatics work. They understand a lot of, medications wise, which medications people are on and what kind of massage is necessary. So it's not like, I'm not putting down like Massage Envy or other places, but I think it's really important when someone has had some lymph nodes removed, or there is, a concern, it is important to actually see a massage therapist who's trained in oncology massage. And yes, and the amount of pressure, the direction, all that matters. And so that's definitely a great integrative approach for not only to reduce, just anxiety and, reduce stress, but also help with some of the symptoms people might experience through a massage therapy. We have amazing massage therapists who are trained in oncology. And so it's called Society for Oncology. So I think it's S for, but if they look for oncology massage therapists, they'll find, and at Sibley's website, there is a whole list of wonderful massage therapists who are trained in oncology. I used to work with one amazing person, Mary. Anyways, so yeah, so they can look at the website. Yeah,
that's a great resource, and actually a good tip, because even I didn't realize that specialization, which you're right, for our patients who've had lymph nodes removed, who might have lymphedema, or just in general, who through radiation or other treatments have particularities in their circulation or bony structures. I think that's actually a very good, that's good to know. That's like a nice tip there. Now, the other integrative medicine approach that we always get lots of questions about, innumerable questions, is vitamin, diet, what we put in our body. I think up until this point, we've been focusing on, well, acupuncture, acupressure, massage. There's sort of a little bit external, but if we go for kind of inside out and talk about diet and vitamins, and how do we sort of just broadly or conceptually, how does this get integrated into an integrative medicine approach, and sort of what's the thinking on how to address diet? There's a lot of diet out there.
There are, and it can be very confusing even for us healthcare professionals, right? Is it keto? Is it not? Is it, fasting? Is it, all the stuff? So it can be, so I know, so when you look at Dr. Andrew Wilde's website, we recommend considering anti-inflammatory diet. So just keep it very simple, as whole diet as possible, as colorful as possible. So if we can just eat, and Dr. William Li, L.I., he has written a book, which is wonderful. It's really about, food, how food can actually help with healing, William Li's book. And so is Andrew Wilde's anti-inflammatory diet. So basically the food pyramid actually excludes anything that has too much sugar. So it starts with lots and lots of vegetables, some fruits, and a variety of colors. And then whole grains, healthy fats like avocado, nuts, things like that. Then, salmon, good fatty fish if people eat fish. Really doing away with a lot of red meat, just because of inflammation. If we can, and yet we know people can have anemia secondary to, a lot of treatments, and might need a jump start, so to speak, to have some of that, good lean meat that will help them with their anemia. So really case by case, but these are just generic recommendations. Lots of lentils and, beans to get plant-based protein if possible, and then some animal protein or some poultry. trying to do, lots of green leafy vegetables. We know there are certain foods like blueberries, broccoli, broccoli like medications like Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, which have sulforaphanes, which are anti-cancer. So it's wonderful to actually be looking at foods that are helping us, that have that category where we can incorporate that into our daily lives. So flax seeds, for example, great lignans. So those are great for, everybody, to boost omega-3 fatty acids for good for the brain, good for the heart, good for the joints. So I keep, 2 tablespoons of ground flax seeds for myself, and I just add it into my cereal, whether I'm having oatmeal or just something else. And, so it just goes in there, and that way I can get my, omega-3 fatty acids that way. Some healthy chocolate, just dark chocolate, just a small amount is great because that's a very rich antioxidant. Additionally, green tea. A good green tea that does not have all the additives, 1 to 2 cups at least, if not more. If caffeine becomes a problem, they could consider decaf. But caffeine, the green tea extract is not necessarily the same benefit as regular green tea would be.
Interesting. So I often in these situations, and I'm going to ask it about the green tea, but then it applies to vitamins and other things. How do you, when you go to a store, if you say, okay, I want to pick simple things that I know I can do. I know I like tea. I'm going to focus on my beverage choice. I'm going to emphasize my water, and I'm going to incorporate green tea. And then I go to the grocery store, and there's 17 different green teas. So is there a way to tell whether a green tea has the benefits that one might derive from having those 1 to 2 cups, or will all of them have the benefit? Do I need to worry about that?
Yeah, so I think that's great question. And it's really tricky. Even I get sometimes confused with all the varieties we have. So I've actually found, 2 or 3 good ones. And that's what I do now, just because they're cleaner. And so I've been, Numi makes it good. I'm thinking about the names, and I can't think of everything, but NUMI, it's a sustainable company, and it's sister and brother. So I like to support people, who are really looking at the planet and trying to help others. So, but there are some good quality green tea. I would buy something that does not have additives, it doesn't have added sugar and milk and things like that. I would also consider doing mushrooms. So there is a company called Tiachino, and they they use dandelion root, as their coffee. So it's not actual coffee, but it just tastes very, robust. And so it's a dandelion. But so really looking at good quality tea, but that doesn't promise you like we can cure cancer with this, so when people start to make claims like that, we have to watch out and see. But otherwise, I would say just buying a simple tea that is good quality. Buying tea leaves is great. So I actually did buy Numi's green tea leaves. And so I have a little strainer, I just put it in the hot cup, and it brews my 1 cup of tea for me. And so that's how I just, get my 2 cups a day. Mushrooms are really, really important. As part of the food pyramid, I would say mushrooms are, as we know, they can be immune boosting. There are a lot of supplements, and we'll talk. I wanted to field that question as well that you asked earlier about vitamins, but mushrooms in general are great. So if people can eat, Asian mushrooms, those are part of Dr. Andrew Wilde's food pyramid. There are lots of supplements, which are also quite confusing. It's like, okay, which supplement to take, right? So I would say if we are looking at the food pyramid and really start to eat very healthy, it's really mostly whole foods, we may not need supplements. We don't need to really consume hundreds of dollars of worth of supplements a month. Usually we get plenty of nutrients from the whole food that we're eating. consuming. So if mushrooms become a problem and people don't like the flavor and they need to do something else, then I would say a good mushroom supplement is worthwhile. There are very good brands out there. I had, sorry, I didn't jot it down, but Paul Stamets, and we can post this if you like, I can provide the information a little later, but Paul Stamets, he's a mycologist, and he's very knowledgeable, and he really puts out very good source of mushroom supplements. So I think it's important to just look at 2 or 3 very high quality mushroom supplements if you are thinking of, and always, 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 it's important to check in with your healthcare provider because, yeah, and the more complex the mushroom compound is, the more difficult it gets. So they have like 1 or 2 or 3 mushrooms. At least we know we have studies to show that. But when it becomes a combination of 7 or 8 mushrooms, it gets tricky, as we know, with other meds, with other medications that patients are taking. So I would, say always, 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 bring that up, like what supplements you're taking, and provide that information to the healthcare providers. Otherwise, we wouldn't know it. We ask our patients, but they don't tell us, we would know to look for any interactions, possible interactions with meds and the supplements.
Yeah. I had somebody today ask me about, one of the side effects of our standard chemo, one of our standard chemos is called paclitaxel. It's a taxane. And the standard side effect is hair loss. It's pretty much the only time I say to patients, this isn't just a maybe, it is a definite. It's a 99.9% chance when you go on Taxol that you lose your hair. And somebody's family member had recommended a supplement, and the person brought the package, like the label, and told me, can I take this? And I looked at it, and it was like 30 different things in it. And it's those combos, to your point, are actually very hard to sort out what to say to someone, because there's just so much in there. But you mentioning the supplements made me think, like, are there any, there's one online resource that is what I always use to look up, but are there any good online resources that you go to say, is this supplement, what do we know about this supplement, and is it safe? So is there something a patient could use if they wanted to pre-check, basically?
Yes. So there are great sources. Thank you for asking. So I like NCCIH a lot. So they have an herb list, an app. So I just have it on my phone, and it gets easier because I can just look it up. MD Anderson has also a resource. It's a free resource that anyone can look that up. So I like that one as well. So I would say just looking at those credible sources, Herbalist and CCIH's website, looking at MD Anderson's, those are a few go-to places where I go to look for possible interactions, and also looking up supplements in general. So for hair loss, are you also then recommending, I know, do they do the ice cap? And
yes. So the ice is very interesting because, I've seen it both for hair loss and for neuropathy in the hands and feet. And so different institutions have different availability. There are some direct to patient options, some companies that actually sort of ship it to your home and then you take it with you. But yes, now at Hopkins, we do have it available for our patients who are interested. And it is the physiology of it makes sense. It cools, it causes vasoconstriction. Less of the chemo goes to those areas, so there's less toxicity. So I've anecdotally seen it work quite well, and then I've seen it not. So it does seem to somewhat be patient dependent, and how cold it is dependent, I think. A little
I see. Yeah. Interesting. Yes. Another, I'm Indian, so we do a lot of hair massage. So just using coconut oil in general. I'm not saying that's a treatment for anything, but I'm just saying, so scalp massage is a wonderful way. I had 2 C-sections back to back, and I had a lot of hair loss after surgeries. And so massaging the hair somewhat helped. Yes. Yeah, so something to consider, just keeping that. Guided imagery, I wanted to also mention about guided imagery. Healthjourneys.com is a wonderful resource where I go to. Belaruth Naprostek. It's at healthjourneys.com. And there are several guided imageries that are focused all on cancer related issues. It's on side effects of chemotherapy. It's related to, some of the symptom management. It's related to well-being. It's related to, just recovering from cancer in general. What would someone do? So those specific guided imagery, the wording is such, and Belaruth is very, uh, very meticulous with the choice of words he uses. And we know that research has shown us that guided imagery can also offer with pain management, with nausea, with some of the neuropathy, with the insomnia, because we know sleep is so necessary for good well-being. So how do we make sure that people are resting well to reduce inflammation and improve health? So I would say if someone was looking for a resource, that is a wonderful resource. And for surgery, I've used Prepare for Surgery program by Peggy Huddleston, and that's a good one as well. It's called Prepare for Surgery, and that's a guided imagery program.
Okay, those are great resources. I'm like, if I'm looking down, it's because I'm taking my own notes. So although we do record these and keep them, there are a few things I don't want to forget even later tonight, as I'm sure we all have our habits, and you mentioned sleep. And one of my worst habits is that pretty much guaranteed tonight when I lay down to go to sleep in my bed, my phone will be in my hand and I will be looking up Peggy and healthjourneys.com and reflecting and looking at these resources that probably would have first and foremost told me the worst thing I can do for my sleep is bring my phone to bed with me. So you mentioned sleep, and I think that certainly is a big part of an integrative medicine approach for many people, fatigue and sleep being two of our main issues. Besides the guided imagery, are there other interventions? Well, I guess you could also say you're wrong, that's not part of what we do, but I think I'm accurate. But assuming I am, what are other sleep interventions that are brought up and options?
Yes. So first and foremost, and this is the opposite of nighttime, is waking up in the morning and experiencing at least 15 minutes of sunshine, which didn't happen today, and I don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow. But when we expose ourselves to sunlight or just light itself in the morning, it turns off the melatonin from previous night. So we actually are charging ourselves better for tonight's sleep. So I really urge people to at least make 10-15 minutes of getting the sunlight, the morning light. It doesn't mean that we have to sit in sunshine, but really getting exposed to that morning light that turns off the melatonin, ongoing production from previous night. So we have a fresh, better, more effective melatonin the night off when we're ready to sleep. So that has shown quite helpful. The second part is really making sure that we're pacing ourselves and avoiding devices an hour before bedtime. Pitch dark is really important. I really try to do that with my blinds and try to make it as dark as possible. When you speak with the sleep doctors, they will tell you turn off the electronic clocks and just have regular, so you should have like no light at all. But as much minimizing the light, the better. I do have blue light filter on my phone, and also I have those orange glasses that you can wear to filter out the blue light. So that's another way to filter blue light. Drinking something warm, if possible, close to bedtime. Keeping our legs elevated so we can actually, drain some of that venous, drainage, and then not have to go to the bathroom too often at night. My favorite beverage is chamomile tea at night. I just love chamomile. It's a great way to do. Do you recommend melatonin for your patients?
I do actually, yes. So when people say they are having issues getting to sleep, particularly when they say they're having issues falling asleep at night. I do the melatonin, and then the beverages and the caffeine, exercise in the morning.
Morning.
We hadn't heard the light thing. And actually I wanted to ask, I made a note to myself to ask a follow-up question is, um, obviously I don't think here there will be sunlight tomorrow morning. And many mornings there aren't, but is there a difference in those studies between a light box and actual light from the sun, whether it be direct sunlight or indirect, or does either actually work?
I am not sure. I
Okay.
know the recommendations are to have the natural light, but
Yeah.
I do not know if the man-made light would also offer similar benefit by turning off the melatonin production that morning. I'm
Yeah.
not sure. So I'm thinking even on a cloudy day, we're
Yeah.
actually getting some light in the morning. So I think that would suffice. And like you said, while we're out there getting light, we should get exercise, which is so helpful to make sure that we're getting enough sleep at night. And I know it's hard when people are tired and the fatigue is so overbearing. So even if we just moved 5 minutes or 7 minutes and every bit counts, we recommend people to move as much as possible and do things that they enjoy, whether it's gardening or walking their dog, or walking with a loved one, or sitting outside even and just being active, outdoors. So yes.
I think one trick I always tell people with melatonin, sometimes people take the melatonin kind of right when they want to go to sleep or like in close proximity to bedtime. And I think one of the big tricks of it is actually that you have to take it earlier in the evening because
That's right.
the action is not instantaneous. And so I feel like that's one of the hidden tricks to melatonin that people don't always appreciate fully. But yeah, this,
Absolutely. They might think like it's like the sleeping pill that you take and now it's not working.
that's right.
So it needs to be taken a couple hours prior to bedtime. Absolutely. You're right. So, so the music is very helpful. Guided imagery for sleep is very helpful. Aromatherapy using lavender is really helpful. So for nausea, ginger aromatherapy is helpful. People can use orange, sweet orange. That was part of my doctorate in nursing project for school at Sibley Hospital. We provided aroma sticks to inpatient oncology patients for nausea and for anxiety. And we found that it really helped make a difference. So there are some very good products out there, credible, that do offer aroma sticks. I don't know if I should mention that product, but anyways, so there are lots of good ones.
Yeah. That's a good, I didn't realize that. I love, yeah. We have in one of the clinics I work in, one of the nurses carries cotton swabs and a little thing of essential lavender oil. And it's always very nice. I never asked her actually if there was evidence behind it. So now it sort of answers.
Yes. In
Um,
fact, at NCCIH, there's a whole chapter on all of the aromatherapy. So it's a really credible resource there. And they have a very nice compilation of all the studies that have been done and what the results were. Some were positive results, some were negative, some were neutral. But it's still, when we start to look at options and someone really enjoys that smell of that particular oil or aroma, I think it's worthwhile to utilize it. Because at the same time, I would say, that doesn't mean that I'm going to diffuse this lavender all day long, because what happens is, just like medications, these oils actually sit on the receptors and then they clog up those receptors and we may not have the same effectiveness. So at my home, I have 3 diffusers. I never turn on any. Those are all gifts. And so, I would just utilize, what's needed, in that given moment, whether it's lavender at bedtime or sweet orange in the mid-afternoon if I was falling asleep or, getting tired or something, then I use, or maybe there's like a difficult, news or something, challenging day, then I would take out my sweet orange and I smell that. It lifts the spirit. You just feel joyous. Or lemon is a great one too. And if someone was feeling nauseous or they don't have appetite, then orange or lemon will be, might offer something. And if they don't have essential oil, they could just, cut a lemon and just smell that. And that's been very helpful. The studies at NCCIH, when you look into aromatherapy or even NIH's or NCI's website, they offer, ginger has been very helpful, of course, for nausea as well. I have to say, we used particularly a combination of aromastick because we didn't want people to have memory associated with ginger and getting their chemo treatments in our infusion center. So we used a combination called Unnausea aromastick, and it was a combination of spearmint, peppermint, ginger, and something else. So
yeah.
So, see what works for you versus, having to, and unfortunately, as we know, the internet is just filled with all these fake claims that are not necessarily true. So I think it's really important to make sure we're making good decisions. And if someone is over promising, it may not be true.
So certainly, speaking of sort of things you read and sort of promises or claims, there's some other supplements. You mentioned mushrooms. You mentioned vitamins and sort of the importance of getting those from your diet. If you're eating a colorful diet that's varied and things like that, that works. But there are claims about things like taking turmeric or taking vitamin C, or soy, which in our patient population always gives me a little caution. So I'm going to caution for the soy because in our patients, many times there's estrogen related issues. So I say that, so there's, different considerations. Always talk to your doctor, particularly about that one. But what about some of these things like turmeric and vitamin C, for instance?
Yes. So I know I get my vitamin C from my blueberries and, from my fruit, or, just squeezing half a lemon, in my water. The blueberries, just getting it from there. Turmeric, I'm Indian, so we use a lot of turmeric. In fact, I use that. I mean, that's like the biggest thing that's gone usually from my spice rack. It's like always turmeric is out because we use it so much. Studies do show that it's a very potent antiviral. It's a potent anti-inflammatory agent. So culinary use is what I usually recommend. I usually don't tell people to pop pills of turmeric unless, they needed to take a higher dose for some sort of inflammation, for a joint problem or something, then that would be different. Or they despise turmeric and they just can't do it.
Yeah.
Culinary. But otherwise, I usually recommend add it to your food, add it to your diet. Our bodies are so smart, they will absorb what's needed and get rid of what's not. With a pinch of black pepper, absorption is better. So usually with some sort of healthy fat. In Indian cooking, my grandma always would make, just saute the oil and then add turmeric at the end, just before she adds the tomatoes and the onions, or so you don't want to burn the turmeric. You want to have a steady heat, but also when it's mixed in a little bit of healthy oil, it gets absorbed better with a pinch of black pepper for absorption. But then we know right now we have curcumin, which is the compound out of turmeric, which is the most potent anti-inflammatory agent.
Yeah.
So really, to summarize, I would say with the supplements, I usually say use, your food, there's so much medicine in the kitchen. So we can just, prepare things in our kitchen that actually add, the medicine that is a better way instead of the pills, if we can.
That's super helpful. I think we probably covered all the main supplements that people ask about. Are there any others you mentioned the mushrooms at the beginning? Are there any others that you consider sort of core foods that you tell people to emphasize adding to their diet? Any others that are sort of important considerations? Blueberries, mushrooms, the citrus, the turmeric, the pepper,
the broccoli, cauliflower family, the sulforaphanes,
okay.
really important.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Is there
A lot of us are deficient in vitamin D.
Oh, yes.
So that is one.
Yeah.
that is one thing I would say. I say, please work with your providers and make sure that your vitamin, if you're having concern about vitamin D, which is a fat soluble, so we don't want to just supplement like crazy, only to find out that our levels are very, I have in my 30 years, I worked a lot in bariatrics and in liver disease. I would say I have not found a lot of people who had toxic levels of vitamin D.
Right.
My impression has been really every time I look at a vitamin D level for a patient, they're deficient.
Yeah.
Maybe I found like 2 people who were above 50
Yeah.
nanograms. Mostly everybody was deficient. So I would say if that is if you really wanted to take some supplements and you wanted to fix, there's a lot of studies and literature now about vitamin D and how it can have an impact on so many of our activities, our body function. So I would say definitely making sure that we are well, supplementing appropriately for vitamin D.
Yeah.
And then omega-3 fatty acids, really looking at a good source of whether it's algae or it's fish, flax seeds, chia seeds, making sure that we're getting good dose of omega-3 fatty acids, which are so important, lowers inflammation, especially as compared to the omega-6s, which we know in our diet, American diet, the ratio of omega-3 and omega-6 is 1:20. And our goal should be 1:4. Like we should take more omega-3, 1:4 ratio of omega-6 to make sure that we're getting good anti-inflammation. So, and we can achieve that through food. I personally know that even though I eat salmon, I eat it just once a week, and I do my flax seeds, and yet I do supplement omega-3. So I do take Nordic Naturals. That's a good company. The Pure Encapsulation. So those are good companies that I a lot of times, or not a lot of times, but I would, that's where I usually get my supplements from if I was looking into supplementing omega-3s.
Yeah. You mentioned checking a vitamin D level. I think many general practitioners check vitamin D levels. Are there any laboratory tests or any sort of test that an integrative medicine doctor considers in their evaluation that maybe I might not, or an internal medicine trained primary care doctor might not?
Yeah, right now the testing, it's very comprehensive. There's tons of testing that's being done, and really, it's. I don't want to use the metaphor can of worms, but it just opens up this whole Pandora's box where it is a lot that can be checked out. Sometimes it's, people get lost with the immensity of how much gets checked. And yet for some people, they really want to know all of their data, all of their testing. So I think if you see an integrative medicine practitioner and they are doing tests, there's a lot of information that's available right now. We were within a hospital, we were very conservative, so we were not doing a lot of testing. But I know of several practices that do very comprehensive tests. The only problem with that is a lot of it is out of pocket. In oncology, we know people are paying a lot of bills, things that are not covered by insurance that they're having to pick up. So I'm really mindful of that. And, sometimes the recommendations might be like, okay, you are missing this SNP, this is what's missing. I think you should, do more of this vitamin or less of this. And then still the recommendations would be eating, whole foods and all of it. Yeah. So it really depends on how details, our patients want to seek, our community wants to seek. If they want lots of details, they're welcome to, really seek it from some of the integrative medicine practitioners who do testing. And there's quite good information. And yet sometimes, we can do without that information if we don't want, have the resources, or we don't want to go into such details.
Yeah, I think sometimes for us in oncology, that's a test that we don't necessarily have an intervention to match with, like information to know, but not necessarily matched to a proven intervention. I think if I'm understanding some of what you're saying, there's a lot of information that can be gained, but not necessarily always different interventions than what you would otherwise do.
Indeed, indeed. Yes. And then, how much energy is someone willing to invest? You
Right.
know, because it's having a diagnosis and going through treatment and survivorship. There is so much that goes into that. It changes our lives in so many ways. And so really being mindful of what can we tackle at this given time. How much do we want to embrace? How much time do I want to, get information? And so everybody is on this spectrum at a different level. So it's really meeting that person one-on-one and figuring out what do they need. If someone says, nothing is limited, my resources, everything is unlimited, I want everything done, I want everything, desire, there are a lot of resources, that they can look into. At the same time, my humble request is to really make sure that you are closely monitored with your primary care, with the integrative medicine practitioners, and not fall prey to some false claims that we don't know works or not work. Another word of caution for us practitioners is, the nocebo effect. We know there's placebo effect, but we have to be mindful of our language, of how we are meeting with our patients to make sure that, we're not taking away hope. It's not like creating this rosy picture either, but at the same time, we can't take people's hope away. So it's really important to have that balance between the two to make sure that, there's so many things that happen. I mean, in my experience more recently, as I connect with people, I've noticed not that miracles happen all the time, but it's just interesting how people receive information in a very different way. When we connect and we see people as an individual, a unique person, and the power how empowered they feel to make a difference in their own care. And then, they're able to do so much better for their well-being. So yeah, I hope I'm making sense.
Complete sense, actually, complete sense. And I have to tell you, when we do we all, for those of you who are on listening, we get on 15 minutes before and we do a little introduction so that we've had a chance to chat for a moment before we get started. And I made a promise, which is that I would not run over. And I'm probably about 1 minute beyond my time. But I think the way you ended and the way you framed our conversation and the broader issues just now is actually the perfect way to end, and the perfect framing for how to think about integrative medicine and our language around care, and thinking about care in a very broad sense, which is incredibly valuable. So I learned a lot tonight. I have lots of notes. I will try not to take my cell phone to bed with me tonight, but I and look these things up right when we're done, as opposed to right as I'm going to bed, as my own personal wellness intervention for this evening. But thank you so much. This was fabulous. It's incredibly helpful and educational for everybody who listens, and for myself, and for everybody who will listen in the future. So thank you, and have a
Thank you
good night.
so much for inviting me. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night. Bye.